not for the plungent sections of monster machine violence, you could easily mistake an Eastward for an indie interactive movie depending on your tasty. That can be a good thing or not so much. The way I see it, and the developers' aspirations are desperations to either their budget or just the style in which they choose to present the story. The pacing seems flawed so much, so that it takes away from the narratives being told and the sense of gradual progressions in the difficulty. You would be mistaken to think this is an issue with the gameplay itself. Also, there is plenty to criticize in this regard as well, despite a prompt popping up when you would unlock a new ability or weapon finding out the effectiveness of all of your moves against enemies was a matter of trial and error all the way up until the end of the game. The controls are fine. They are not revolutionary by any means, but they also are not so loose as they majorly impact the flow of battles, adjusting the directions of attacks and the changing cooldown times between attacks. Were the only real issue, oftentimes I would charge up an energy blast, which would then require a prolonged cooldown, only to find that despite the reprisal confirming I would hit the target, the blast would instead get stuck on a wall when it came to John's physical attacks. The cooldown between attacks also varied, as if there was a longer cooldown after a combo. This would be fine, except it was never explained, and also did not seem like there was a consistent amount of this that consistent a combo. Of course, the trial and error in terms of effectively betting may appeal to some players, as such the controls deserve a solid 3 out of 5. The mechanics and gimmicks presented in Eastward deserve praise, even if solely for their rarity. You get to save your game using the physiological refrigerator, so this that at least Eastward seems to borrow heavily from big budget Nintendo exclusives without ever expanding of them, and in some cases even taking away notable. The Dangerous remind me of Zelda Dungeons with mini bosses and hurt containers lying hiding throughout, but in a linear enough design that it's hard to miss these timed areas. In one of the last dungeons, where you have to progress quickly enough to collect hourglasses and extended the running down timer, or it forces you to restart the sections. There is a sword and pen fight near the end. That's all about timing. Speaking of pens, so a frying pan is your main weapon near the end of chapter 2. You take part in a space sequence, which unlike the previous examples does happen another time right before the final boss. On multiply assumptions, you partake in timed James and LA collecting crabs at an underground farm, rounding up flying pigs at another, or playing carnival-style baseball games. The boss fights also vary from waves of laser enemies, mini-bosses, quick time event bosses, battle where only one of the two main characters can partake, and someone figuring all those gimmicks out on your own is rewarding in itself. However, you never truly get to expand on any of them. They mostly appear once and are never used again. The one unique mechanic would be cooking. I have never played a game where you play slots in order to determine how potent your dish comes out. It may sound weird, but it definitely works, and there's science to it. There is a specific amount of ticks you have to wait between each row in order to successfully select 3 on the same icons and cook the best meal possible. It's a great mechanic, sounds unlike many games you are forced to cook in preparations for battles and dungeons due to how quickly you can lose hearts. I could keep going, but I don't want to spoil everything the game has to offer in this department. Hopefully this is enough evidence to warrant it a 4 out of 5. For the mechanics and gimmicks, on a more negative note, level designs leave much to be desired. Dungeons extremely linear, and any missions outside of dungeons requires tons of backtracking. Also, the 5 main hub areas are open. I found very little reason to explore outside of finding stores in order to restock my supplies. In between chapters, you also find yourself digging up mostly insignificant parts of the story. Though dream sequences sometimes include short triple levels that don't add much to the game. All that being said, there are still a few hidden areas containing treasure chests that require some thinking to get into, and as such the level design deserve a 2 out of 5. Another disappointing aspect out of the game was the glitches in my 22 hours playthrough. The game only crashed on me twice, but both times it was at one of the most inopportunity moments. The first time was during chapter 3 right after I saved missions, and I tried to leave the hub city. As soon as I walked out of the city, the game crashed. Fortunately, I reloaded from an auto save.